Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're here to do a presentation on knowing your contract. We're going to present to you the panels. Our panelists, we're going to present the slides of key contract highlights that we would like to focus on tonight. Our presenters are, and we hope Lynn will be able to join us, Lynn Romanek. She is the co-chair of this committee.
Oops.
Me, Jody Johnson. I am the other co-chair of the Contract Enforcement Committee. We have Mark Naden. Hopefully he will be able to join us as well. Dottie Ziplip. Dr. Suzanne Windsor. Dr. Windsor is with us. Gary Brennan. Gary is leading the slide presentation for us tonight. He's with us. Brian O'Neill is, I saw Brian. Yes, Brian is with us as well. And Gary and Brian are our UNISERV directors. And I'm going to go back. Dr. Windsor is the PGCEA vice president of the union. And then we have Amanda Jennings. She's our PGCEA communications and government relations specialist. So this presentation is going to focus on language updates to 6 different areas, well, 5 different areas that we're going to focus on, and then we'll take questions. So the first one is contract basics, planning time and collaborative planning, substituting for colleagues, caseload coverage, half-day planning, half-day grading days, special education compliance days, and union being on the staff meeting agendas. And then we'll close out with questions.
Okay, Dr. Windsor.
Getting started, contract basics. Union contracts are bilateral agreements between the labor union and the employer. A labor union contract codifies the terms and conditions of employment for union members, as well as the employer's obligations and responsibilities. Union contracts are enforceable and carry the weight of law. Violations are subject to the grievance procedure, which is Article 5 of the negotiated agreement. Enforcement of the contract is a responsibility of both labor and management. Both administration and employees should know the contract and be able to identify when it is being bent or broken. It is the responsibility of the union and the members to ensure the contract is being followed fairly, consistently, and in good faith. Not all workplace issues are covered by the contract. Contract basics. First, the PGCEA/Board of Education contract covers all Unit 1 members. The contract language cannot be changed or waived by individual schools or work sites. If an administrator or even a Unit 1 member wants unit members to vote on amending or waiving a part of the contract, members should speak up immediately and make it clear this is not permissible. Contract rights of Unit 1 members cannot be altered or violated through a majority vote of their work site. Contract language versus administrative procedures. So contract language is a binding agreement enforceable by law between the labor, which is us, and management, whereas administrative procedures are standard operating procedures that management develop to govern day-to-day operations of the school system with regards to system guidance, community relations, administration, business and non-instructional operations, and the ones that most pertain to us, 4,000 personnel, 5,000 students, 6,000 instruction, and of course, the student code of conduct. We also have new construction and internal board policies.
Brian, I think you were going to put the link to those administrative procedures.
Yep. I'll put that in the chat.
Unit 1 members have a direct role in creating contract language through bargaining and the ratification process. But when it comes to administrative procedures, those are created by the administration to carry out policies that the Board of Education adopts. PGCEA can provide input and some changes to APs if we're invited to the committees to work on them. School Administration Unit 1 members must follow the language of the contract, Board of Education policy, and administrative procedures. This benefits both labor and management by creating a common understanding by both parties and consistent and fair standards for staff. Trivia time, Brian.
All right, so let's launch the first question here. Give everybody a few seconds here. So first full question. In step 3 of the grievance procedure, the Chief Human Resources Officer will now have how many business days from receipt of the grievance to render a written decision? We'll give you a few seconds here. Give you about 5 more seconds. See some folks coming in. And only 4%. There's one person that got it right. The correct answer is 20 days. 20 days. That's what it is. But one of you all got it right. So we'll try to do better the next one. Results. Can you all see the results? There we go.
Is that the only question right now, Brian?
Yep.
Okay, so the next article is about planning time. This was supposed to be done by our member Mark Naden, but he was having some technical difficulties, so I'm just going to jump in and cover this slide for him. All planning time language can be found in Article 6.2. And important, some of the things we really want to cover where we see violations occur. So the first thing in Article 6.2C2, teacher planning time will be scheduled in accordance with the following procedure and shall be unit member directed. You decide what you're going to do during planning time. At secondary schools, you're to have a continuous block of 45 minutes daily of planning time during the student day. So that's at the start when classes start to when classes end. Usually your planning time would align to the student schedule and the classes students participate in. On 2 days, if your classes are longer than 45 minutes, some folks are on 60-minute periods, others are on a block schedule, or they get 90 minutes per period. At least 2 times per week, a teacher shall receive planning for a full class period. So at least twice a week, if the student periods are longer than 45 minutes, all of that time is for teacher-directed planning.
Article 6.2C, still talking about teacher planning time for elementary schools, early childhood centers, and special education centers. And the language here for these areas, we're looking at 40 minutes minimum, but that's for every day, 5 days a week. However, the minimum that a principal shall schedule is 240 minutes for the whole week. That can be included before school or after school, that last 40 minutes. But within 5 days, for 5 days in elementary school, you should have a planning period of no less than 40 minutes. That's 200 minutes. And then that additional 40 minutes can be used either before school, after school, with an increment of no less than 20 minutes each time if it's broken up.
The other thing in the contract in 6.2C, letter C, Unit 1 members will be responsible for determining the use of their planning time. So again, it is individual planning time. One thing I wanted to kind of point out, we have found a number of situations where administrators try to use Article 6.2H to kind of say they can dictate what you do because it lists things that can be done during planning time. So it says when you're on your planning or anytime you're not teaching, you're to be doing professional activities, planning for the instructional program, conferring or meeting with pupils, parents, and colleagues, studying and maintaining records, or any other. All this language, H says, is you have to be working during your planning time on work-related activities. You can't be doing your online Christmas shopping or holiday shopping. You can't be talking on the phone with your sister in Indiana. You have to be working and doing these things. This does not mean your principal can say, oh, I'm going to schedule a parent conference because that's listed in H. No, you can schedule to talk to a parent during your planning time if you want to. That's work related. This language does not say your principal determines that you'll use that time to go to an IEP or confer with your colleagues or anything else. Brian?
All right, so we're going to go to the second poll question. So the second poll question here is, could an unscheduled emergency require that a Unit 1 member does not receive all or a portion of his or her planning time for the purpose of blank? The member will be compensated in addition to their regular pay at the hourly rate of, it's actually $32 an hour for this fiscal year. So fill in the blanks. We'll give you a couple of minutes here, couple of seconds. Much better this time. I can already see the results coming in. 5 more seconds and I'll close the poll out. All right, so it looks like 73% of you all got this one right. The correct answer is D, lunch, recess, duty coverage. Good job.
Yeah, the important thing to note there is if you go to any of these other meetings during your planning, you're volunteering to do that. So you're not going to get paid for it. If your principal says, well, the only time we can do it is during your planning, then they should provide you with time at another point in the day to make up for the time if they're requiring you to attend that meeting. But there is no pay because you decide you'll go to an IEP during your planning time, for example.
Gary, we have a couple questions in the Q&A that pertain to planning. One is, how do we address when SIT meetings are being handled during planning time?
SIT meetings should not be scheduled during planning time. Again, what you should say is, I can't make the meeting, that's during my planning time. If it's a SIT meeting, it should be scheduled during time the principal controls. That could be before or after school, or they could get you coverage so you could go to that meeting if you need to during your other time that they control. But your planning time is not time that's available for you to be required to go to a SIT meeting.
And then the next question, similar vein, ILT meetings and the like, can they be scheduled during planning time?
No.
Thank you.
Well, I just to be sure, they could be scheduled for them. You're not required to go then, if that makes sense.
So when IEP meetings, ILT meetings, and the like are scheduled during planning, we should not be there.
Right.
Unless we
Now, there could be,
volunteer.
right, if it's time and you're in your minimum planning time for the day has been met, and there's another time where you don't have students that you're usually planning, that could be, they could assign you to go to a meeting during that time, but they can't say, okay, you get 40 minutes of planning today, but 30 minutes of are going to be spent at a SIT meeting. No, it doesn't work that way. If that is an issue, at the end, we're going to talk about what you should do if you believe there might be a contract violation. Thanks for watching, for those who's in. Collaborative planning, everybody's favorite topic. Any non-instructional time labeled as collaborative planning shall not be counted towards required minimum planning time. That is, it actually says that twice in the article on collaborative planning. They cannot, collaborative planning has to be done outside of your lunch and your daily planning time. It cannot be in place of it. And if your principal is telling you, and here's what happens sometimes, particularly at the secondary level, if the classes last longer than 45 minutes, they'll schedule collaborative planning for the start of that period, right? And then they'll go longer than, so let's say it's 60 minutes. If you have a 60-minute block of planning and they want to have collaborative planning during that time, they can have a 15-minute collaborative planning. If they hold it at the beginning of the time, when 15 minutes are up, you should calmly and professionally say, okay, it's now my planning time. I'm going to leave and go to my classroom and have my planning. If they say, no, you sit down, don't be, insubordinate, sit down. When the meeting's over, call the union, because that is a contract violation.
And there's another question about the planning time. Since we have planning time for 4 days a week, one day we have collaborative planning and no planning period. Is this correct?
No, that is a
It's
contract
not, right?
violation. I'm not sure what school you're at. My advice is contact your UNICERT director tomorrow. And then this is somewhat long language. I'm not gonna read it all to you. Again, I just want to show you, this is in the contract, so you can point it out to your principal. And then the collaborative planning is not just supposed to be a meeting. It's supposed to be a time where groups of educators come together and discuss concerns related to their students and their teaching. It is not a time to just be talked at. And supposedly, principals have been made aware that the use of collaborative planning is supposed to be in line with what's called the Prince George's County Public Schools Collaborative Planning Process Model, which is this nifty booklet that PGCPS created. I believe it's on the staff portal if you wanted to see it. And again, it basically says that collaborative planning should be doing one of these 4 things. It should be either looking at data specific to your students or your school's data. It should be examining student work, talking about, for example, if you had a benchmark, what are some of the things that you might want to look at, doing some kind of study group on an issue of concern of the educators, or on planning together, lesson planning, et cetera. It should, again, not just be an administrative meeting.
Okay, 1 second. We have someone asking, why did we skip their question? It's from Candace. It says, I am a non-classroom teacher and have 1 lunch duty. When I am asked to cover additional lunches, can I be compensated? I work in a high school.
If it is during your planning time, then yes, you should be compensated for that. If it's not during your planning time, then you would not be compensated for that. And if you're not a classroom teacher, you need to look at your schedule. You should still have 45 minutes of you directed time, or you're not assigned different tasks. So you have to take a look at your schedule. Obviously, there's no nothing in the contract that says you can be paid if you miss your lunch to do lunch duty. You should never be asked to give up your lunch. So we don't have pay because you gave up your lunch. You don't give up your lunch. That's law. You're as a worker, you're entitled to a half an hour to have some food, use the bathroom, take a breath, and then go back to work.
That's
Okay? But if you're losing your
uninterrupted.
planning time, yeah. So if that second lunch duty you're being asked to do is not a part of your normal day, and it cuts into what you consider to be, or what's identified as your planning time, you should be paid that amount.
Gary, can we go back to the slides to show the amount of time that you should have, because some of the questions are repeating those slides again. Okay.
It's
So-
probably about elementary. Elementary planning is a little trickier sometimes than secondary. So for
the person didn't state, this is our collaborative plan is on, I will read. They were asking, asking again about IP meetings. Should they be during the?
No, that's actually in the next slide, the one I was just about to do.
Oh, okay.
Oops,
And
did I go
parent
on?
teacher conferences after school.
Okay, so what can and can't your planning time be used for? The following is not to be counted towards contractual planning time. Collaborative planning, never. So again, those people that are saying 1 day a week, we don't have any self-directed planning because we are being told we have to collaboratively plan, clear, black and white contract violation. Mandatory meetings of any kind do not count as collaborative planning. So if someone is telling you, you have to go to an IEP meeting, right? That's now a mandatory meeting. That doesn't count towards your planning time, which is teacher directed. IEP meetings, parent conferences called by administration, mandatory tutoring, or any other time a unit member is required to be with students or parents. Again, you can decide to do those things. And I can remember times where I really wanted to talk to a parent, and the best time to do that was during my planning time. And then I said, okay, I'm going to do that today because this is a task I need to do, and I'm going to make that decision. If my principal said, oh, I just set up a parent conference during your planning, I would say, well, either you need to get me some different planning time then, or we're going to need to reschedule because it was being planned not by me, but by somebody else. And obviously, lunch never counts. I had a school last year where the principal for one department was actually counting their lunch to get to the planning time minutes. That's crazy. All right. Next issue is substituting. Lynn was going to do that. So Jody, Suzanne, Brian, somebody else want to? Oh, Lynn is here. Lynn, I'm sorry, I missed you. Lynn,
Yeah,
you gotta take there.
I was able to get on.
Thank you. We're glad to see you.
Yeah. Okay, so substituting. Any Unit 1 member who volunteers or is assigned, wait a minute, to cover or teach a class other than their regular scheduled class shall be compensated in addition to their regular pay at the hourly rate of $32 payable in no less than 1 hour increments. So we have a little scale here: 30 minutes, $32, 50 minutes, $32, 65 minutes, 32 times 2, 90 minutes, 32 times 2. What the substitute forms, they changed them last year. So you will put in the minutes that you substitute. They want those in there. So you put the mod number and you put when the mod ends and when it begins, and then it will ask you how many minutes. And always substitute and you use one of those forms, make a copy for yourself or scan it to yourself so you have a record of when you did substitute and you can double check their math in case there's a problem.
And thanks, Lynn. One thing I do want to add to that, if you are subbing for one period, say at the secondary level, or one special at the elementary level, then you would just be however long that block of time was, right? So if you have 55-minute classes, you get 2 hours of pay because, because you've gone, you get 1 hour of pay. If it's a 65, 70, 80-minute class, you get 2. If you're subbing for more than one block of time, you don't add each block separately for the day. You have to add up the total minutes for that day and then round up, right?
Right.
So it's not like if you were at a high school and they had 90-minute periods and there were 4 of them that you sub for, you would get 8 hours of pay. That's longer than your work day is. That's not possible. It would be adding up the total number of minutes.
Yeah, that's why, like I said on the sub sheet, it will say how many minutes. The other thing is if they split a class between you and another teacher, you both get that sub pay, both of you. Substituting for a co-taught class when no sub is sent. That's one of those areas. If you are in a co-taught class and you are the general education teacher, you do get the sub pay if the co-teacher is not there.
But that's true the other way as well.
Right. If you are the only teacher in that classroom and they don't have a sub for the day and you're the special educator and they say, we don't have a substitute. Sorry, you're it. You get that sub pay. Now, according to Maryland State Department of Education, the special education classes that are mandatory are English language arts and math. Social studies is an every other day special education situation, and science does not have to be covered at all. So if you have a co-teacher in science and you're lucky enough to have one, if they're not there for that day, you don't get the sub pay for that. It's just English language arts and math.
And one other thing, on the form, it does say for substituting, you cannot be paid for more than 6 hours. And that's because if you're in someone else's class for a full day, you have to subtract your 30-minute lunch and their planning time, right? If they're trying to assign you to another class during their planning time, don't take it, because if you go above 6 hours, you can't get paid for that 7th hour.
What about if you're splitting the class? If the class
Same thing. If you're splitting the class, those students should be, you get a half hour, and all those students should be going to specials during your normal planning time.
Okay, that was one of the questions.
Gary, could you please explain the thing about per student? It means per student hour.
Yeah, per student.
Not per child sitting in the class.
Yeah, that would be incredibly awesome. But that is not the case. It's the time you're in front of students, not the time you're in front of each individual student.
If a para is assigned to your class and they are not there, you do not get sub pay. Paras do not count under the category. Neither do paras or IELTS aides. Dedicated aides do not count under that category either.
Right. You only get paid when you're doing the work of another Unit 1 member. And Lynn, covering for non-classroom based educators?
Oh, sorry. This is in my way. Hold on. Okay. Covering for non-classroom based educators. In the event a Unit 1 member is designated by an assigned supervisor to cover the caseload work of another Unit 1 position in addition to their regular assignment, The unit one member shall be compensated $30 for fiscal year 23, 32 for fiscal year 24, and 34 for fiscal year 25 per hour in no less than 1 hour increments for each additional assignment. In the event a non-classroom based educator is absent and the principal supervisor divides the caseload between multiple staff members, the unit members to whom the work is assigned shall be compensated in addition to their regular pay, $30 for fiscal year 23, $32 in fiscal year 24, and $34 in fiscal year 25 per hour in no less than hourly increments. So, for example, if you have a long-term science teacher substitute that doesn't know how to plan lessons, that doesn't know how to grade, and you are assigned to cover that, you got to keep track, and that is considered covering. Because there are quite a few instances around the county that we've heard of that is the case, that you just don't have a teacher in the area, in the position, and the science department chair has been asked to do this duty.
I think this one would be more pertain to those people who are like student services, for example, non-classroom based. We had a
Right.
counselor that was assigned to cover a whole caseload at one school, and they didn't want to compensate her. And Gary and UniServes were very instrumental in helping her secure a victory and getting her compensation.
Right. I'm sorry. I just meant thinking back on the substituting positions that we discussed previously. It just came into my head. Sorry.
And we filed, just as a quick note, we filed many grievances over the last year in relation to substitute coverage, and workload coverage for non-classroom based educators as well. And so I put a copy of the form, whether you're a classroom based educator or a non-classroom based educator, you use the same form. So I put a copy of that form in the chat. Just make sure that you're submitting those on a regular basis, keeping a log of the hours that you're spending either substituting, or if you have additional workload because of an absent colleague, if you're a non-classroom based educator, just make sure that you're keeping a log and submitting those on a regular basis to your timekeeper. Okay, so that's in the chat.
Brian, we had a couple of examples you were going to share of when
There's more
this
than a couple.
language.
So there are quite a few scenarios that were developed. I think it was by Human Resources, but we've taken a look at these because the original batch of scenarios that they gave to us last year, we were not in agreement with. And so now it's more prescriptive. There are some scenarios. I can pick out just a couple just to give you all an idea of what would be eligible for coverage pay and what wouldn't. Bear with me. So just to give you a quick example, and pick one that's easy. So a school has 6 special education teachers. One of those teachers goes out on FMLA, right? I know this has happened, right? So the sped caseload from the one teacher is now moved to another teacher. Will that teacher be paid the PGCEA caseload / workload covering payment? Yes. The answer is yes, you would. I could pick out one that may be a little bit more complicated here. So here we go. So during the student-based budget process, positions at a school are reduced due to decreased budgeting and or student enrollment, et cetera. The school loses 1 professional school counselor. Are the remaining professional school counselors due to receive the PGCEA caseload covering payment? The answer is no, right? And the reason for this is, given that the positions were reduced, the school is now expected to meet the student needs with the remaining staff, right? So that would be a scenario where you would not be eligible for pay. There's about 15 of these, right? And so I don't want to go through all of them, but we do. Gary, this is located on PGCPS's website as well. Should I put a link to this?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to put a link
And
to this because I think that this will be a helpful tool for everybody, because you're going to see these scenarios in different schools, and you're going to have questions about whether or not you're eligible for pay, or a colleague might ask you. And this is just a good resource because although it's not an exhaustive list of scenarios, I think that it'll be a helpful tool where most things will fit into, and you'll be able to get a clear answer as to whether or not you're eligible for that pay. So I'm going to put this in the chat.
And Brian, one thing I just want to add, because it was one of those grievances that we filed last year, was the system originally was saying that when people were doing extra work because of a vacancy that existed at the beginning of the school year, even though it was a funded position, even though it meant they were doing double duty, because it was vacant at the beginning of the year, they weren't going to pay them the course load casework pay. And we grieved that because we said it didn't matter why they were doing. If there's a funded position and they can't hire for it, and it's still a funded position that you're trying to find someone, you have to pay them. And we went all the way to arbitration on that, and we won. So if you're covering for a vacancy, whether it's subbing or caseload work, you should get the pay for any of the time that you're doing that work.
Yep. All right, so we're going to go on to the third question. So a co-teacher is absent and the remaining co-teacher delivers instruction alone for a 45-minute class. How much substitute pay will the remaining co-teacher be entitled to? Give you all about 10 seconds here. Yep, not going to pull a fast one on our members. So the correct answer is $32 an hour. Okay, that's 86% of you all got that one right. And if for co-teachers, payable in no less than half-hour increments. That's correct, right, Gary?
Mm-hmm.
So that you would get the full amount, even though you're working just for 45 minutes covering for your colleague, you get $32 an hour. So there you go.
In continuation with that particular trivia question, we have a question in the Q&A. Says, I'm a general ed teacher co-teaching with a special ed teacher. When my co-teacher is out, they place a paraprofessional in my room and pay her the sub pay. Is this a violation to the contract? What can I do to address this?
No, it's not necessarily a violation because paras can serve as subs. So if they put a sub, just if they had put a sub who's not already working in the building in, you wouldn't be entitled. So if they use the contract language for 2250 that says they can be taken from their usual duties to serve as a sub, then there would be sub coverage in the class. You would have that separate, that second adult in the room acting as a teacher, but they have to do the same role that any sub would need to do in that situation.
Okay, and that answers Patty King's question as well. And then there's another question. If a special educator is asked to cover the caseload for a vacancy, does this still apply?
Yes, that would be covered under the language 6.2F. If you're having to do the casework of another special educator because they never fill the position, and that is a funded position, the school system has identified that the numbers that position should be filled at your school, but they couldn't fill it. So you have to take on a second caseload or even part of a caseload, then you would be covered by this language.
And there's another question. Does the contract address teaching multiple courses and the amount of planning periods they have, such as teaching US history and AP history, which would equal 2 planning periods?
Yeah, that's covered under, I think it's, I can't think of the language right now, but yeah, if you have more than 3 preparations, so if you're teaching more than, and this is based on numbers in the course catalog, and there are different numbers for US history and AP US history. If you're teaching both of those, even though it's the same period, that counts as 2 separate preps. So that would be 2 classes. And then if you have another course that you teach, you'd now be at 3. If you have anything beyond that, you're now at 4. It doesn't automatically mean you get another planning period, but it does mean you have to have a meeting with your principal to talk about how you're going to address the additional workload. They could try to meet it in a number of ways. Obviously, the best would be additional planning time, but it could also be releasing you from certain duties, providing you, if your classes are longer than 45 minutes, with daily extra planning. So it's kind of a back and forth you're supposed to have with your administration to set up a meeting and talk about how that can be addressed if you have more than 3 courses that you're teaching.
Gary,
And I would say that absolutely
that's an Article
includes.
7A.
Thanks, Brian. 7A.
Your assignment. Yep.
And I believe we've addressed this and who should run those meetings, talking about the our collaborative planning meetings, our ITLs. Should they run the
They can run it, but they should also be all the unit members involved in the meeting should have input. It shouldn't just be everything determined by even another Unit 1 member.
Okay, and then the last one, my grade is the only grade in the building that was not put on the collaborative planning schedule, but we are still required to do the same amount of work that all the other teachers get to do. This is the 2nd year. What do I do?
I'm not sure I understand how that would work. Collaborative planning is not required by the contract, so you're not contractually owed collaborative planning. But if you are doing work and to support others having collaborative planning, there might be an issue there, if I understand the question. I don't know, Brian, if that's something that's ever come up in your. You're on mute. Okay, the next issue we have is grading and planning half days. This year, there's new language that we negotiated last year, but didn't take effect until this year. And that's Article 6.2 C, planning time number 1. And that says, beginning this school year, and for the duration of this agreement, Unit 1 members will be provided a half day each quarter for individual Unit 1 member directed planning time at an alternative work site of their choice. So it's a half day. You don't have to be in your school building. What happened this year was the system forgot to put these days in the calendar. PGCEA noticed that they were not in the calendar. We called them out on it, said, we're going to have to grieve it. You're going to have to add these days. They agreed that they had to add them. And so they are now combined with your grading days. And you now have a full day of work from home. One half of that day is the grading day. The other half is the individual planning time. So the related language, oops, I think I skipped something. The related language has to do with what's in 6.1 work year, the grading day, half day. And if we remember, for a long time, the school system was saying a 2-hour early dismissal counted as a half day grading day. We said no, a half day means half of the day, 3 hours at least, if you include lunch, 3.5 hours without students. So the days that have been identified for these work from home days, and they're considered a half day in asynchronous day for students, are November 3rd. So that's coming up, January 22nd and April 5th. Because there is no half-day grading day fourth quarter, that's only happens quarters 1, 2, and 3, they have to still identify a half day in fourth quarter where there won't be students, and you'll be allowed a half day to do individual planning time from home.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to foresee people are going to ask, is this a day where they can work asynchronous work from home as well?
Yes, that fourth quarter planning day will be working from home. And then please, if you're a special educator, utilize the additional 5 days you have a year to work from an alternate location, home, most likely, but wherever is best for you, to do all the paperwork, the IEP compliance, the testing data, all that additional work you have to do to make sure that we are honoring IEPs and staying in compliance with state and federal mandates related to special ed. The way that those days work is you request or you tell the principal, these are the days I'd like to use. You can schedule no more than 2 in any one quarter, so you need to spread them out over the year. The principal can say, look, I don't want it to be on Fridays because we have too many subs on Fridays and it's going to put too much of a burden on the rest of the staff. So try to pick your days Tuesday through Thursday. That would be considered reasonable. But a principal can't just keep denying the days you put forward. They have to come to agree on when you're going to do these days. My advice is get these meetings, these days on your calendar if you haven't yet, so that you're not losing any of these 5 days. If fourth quarter comes around and you have not taken any of these days, you only get to use 2 of the 5 because you can't have more than 2 in any one quarter. So please spread them out so that you're getting all 5 days. Really importantly, you don't, when we first started this last year, they said they were going to put a code in to make sure that people were putting these in as special ed compliance days. They do now have a separate absence code, and you need to put them into Oracle using that code. Part of that is to track that people are using them. Our fear is if special educators aren't using these days, they will come for them in the next round of contract bargaining, and we don't want that to happen. And the last issue we wanted to go over, Jody. You're on mute.
Yes, and our last issue, where you can find it in the contract of 4.1, PGCEA rights and privileges for staff meeting agendas. It is the right and the privilege of your area rep, your building rep, to be added to the principal's faculty meeting agenda. It says PGCEA Association representatives will be permitted time to make announcements at the end of faculty meetings, provided Unit 1 members who do not wish to stay will be free to leave the meeting. Please, please, please have your AR to begin to claim that time on the agenda so that they can make those important announcements, announce that there's a meeting or whatever's happening so that you can stay unified in your building.
Right. And then finally, if you think there is a contract violation in your school, what should you do? This is going to be very brief, but in one of our future trainings is going to be on filing grievances and the step 1 informal meeting process with your principal. So we're going to go into this in a lot more depth at a later meeting. But if you think there's a contract violation, look, if you know it is, if you only are getting 30 minutes of uninterrupted planning time a day, you know you don't need to discuss that. You know there's a violation, but you might not be sure what to do. Let your building rep know, talk to them. If you still need assistance before you meet with your principal, call your UniServe director and let them know there's a possible violation. And then try to solve the problem at the lowest level by talking to your administrator and giving them a chance to address your concern. If you don't let them know it's a problem, they'll either think, oh, this person doesn't care that I'm violating their contract, or they might not even know they're violating the contract. I mean, that can happen. But if you don't raise it, it's going to stay the way it is. If you don't bring it forward through the union and then having a conversation with the principal to try to fix it, or at least say they're not going to fix it, then it's just going to go on without change. If after you've talked to the principal or you just need next steps, please contact your UniServe director about next steps that could include filing a formal grievance. There's an official sheet we have to fill out. We have to give that to the principal. There's a timeline that has to be followed. You don't want to wait, because if you blow the timeline, the system could just say, this is not a timely grievance and we're not going to address it. Now, if it's an ongoing violation, we would still be able to do it. Like if they continue to violate your planning time, then we would say, well, it's still happening. So the clock continues to tick, but you do need to follow the timeline.
And Gary, can I add something too? When you're experiencing these kinds of issues, I think it's always good to give yourself an email of what's happening, the date and time, because things move so quickly in school. You might say, oh God, I thought about that on Monday it happened and I can't remember what time or what day or what was said. But if you can give yourself an email that way, when you go to your building rep, when you go to your administrator, whoever you're going to, you can have those notes. So you have that data to show and discuss.
That's great. That's a really good piece of advice. One thing, and I know our vice president knows this, always document these things. Keep notes, keep records. And if you meet with the principal, I always tell people, send an email after the meeting. This is my understanding. This is what you said you were going to do to stop this violation. And if they don't respond to you, then you could assume they agree with you. If they respond with something that's different, you need to get the UniServe director involved.
And please hear that, what Gary said, by sending a nice email and saying, this is my understanding of the situation. This is my understanding of our discussion, because we find sometimes administrators, they might be busy. They might have been trained not to document discussions. So you're nicely asking to verify, this is my understanding, and giving them the chance to respond, but you will have that record that you have reached out. And if they don't respond, then that's on them.
Another tip I would like to give is, remember, if something should happen to you, get put in teacher jail, you may not have access to your emails. So please print them out or send them to a non-PGCPS email account so that you have a backup.
Yes.
All good advice.
And
anytime you speak to your principal about a contract violation, you have the right to invite your rep and or your UniServe director. You don't have to go to those meetings by yourself. So you always have the right to have union representation with you. Another important thing is put in writing to the principal what exact part of the contract you believe is being violated. They have a right to know, because sometimes they'll go look at it and they'll realize, I'm just plain out wrong on this, and they'll want to resolve it at that lowest level. Like I said, though, keep your eye out. We are going to talk more about filing grievances at a later training. Okay, we have a few minutes. Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a few other questions. There are 4 groups, and one of the homeroom teachers is absent, and we are 3 Spanish teachers. The 3rd grade teachers are sorting the group 4 to the 3 teachers. We have 7 to 10 additional students. Does this count as subs that are, does this count as subs, I guess, in the 4th class?
Yes, if you are
Splitting.
having additional students put in your classes to cover for an absent teacher, then that's covered by the contract language.
Okay,
But that's how they're dealing with that absence.
yes. Then we have, if you have 2 planning periods, can you be required to sub for one of them, even on days when you have lost your planning to a meeting?
You
Oh,
could, again, they could, you got to get paid for it. But again, they shouldn't always go to the same person. If you haven't had, if, for example, they need to always ask for volunteers when it comes to subbing. And then they are supposed to be then being equitable if they have to make people do it. So it could happen. People do lose their planning because they have to go sub. They need to get paid. And if it's happening on a regular basis, you need to say to the principal, this is not equitable. This isn't working for me. You need to find someone else. I can't not have my planning so frequently. And again, if that conversation doesn't work, call your, either talk to your building rep or call your UNICERT director.
should elementary schools who teach at academies have the same planning time as middle school teachers, since our school is longer?
If you're teaching kids that are middle school aged, and Brian, jump in if I'm incorrect, if you're teaching middle school age students and they're on a period schedule, then you should follow the secondary teacher planning time. If you're teaching third graders in an academy, you would be on the elementary planning schedule.
And here's a great question, which means that we didn't meet one of the questions was, how do you become a building rep in your school?
Jody, tell him.
Oh,
Well, at the beginning of the school year, you should have had an election to elect your building rep and your FAC. So it was an anonymous person.
Well, we can just add this. It is not too late to elect. If your school has not yet elected their building reps or their FAC, it is not too late. Contact your UNICERT director for more information about running an election in your school.
Mhm.
There's no deadline anymore as to when you need to get these elections done.
and if you need
Right.
assistance, there is the NECC, which is the Nominations, Elections, and Credentialing Committee with PGCEA, comprised of colleagues of yours from throughout the county. So they'll be able to assist if you need it as well.
Yeah, and the NECC can even run the election if you're in your building, if you need that assistance.
Yep.
And I would even add, if you're in schools entitled to 3 building reps and they only have 2 right now, they can hold an election for that 3rd spot if people are still interested. If someone's like, wow, I wish I had done that, they can hold another election for that last position if they're entitled to a 3rd building rep or an additional FAC member. Any other questions?
Now, were those from Facebook? I saw it in the chat. Maybe it was Amanda that said that there were some additional questions from Facebook.
There
Amanda, do you
are,
want to?
yes. So we had a couple people who had some questions on Facebook. Ms. Parker wanted to know if the contract covers when special educators are covering vacancies by working outside of our contract hours.
If you're doing the work of another Unit 1 member, then I would keep track of the number of hours you're doing and submit it. It gets tricky if you're doing the work outside of the school day, but if it's that because you're teaching classes and then they have you assigned all day to other work, then I think you should be eligible for money. So you should contact your UNICERT director and have a conversation about how that's working.
And then another question related to special education. The special education paperwork days are not enough when you have vacancies. Can you try and get more days? Sorry, that wasn't really actually a question. I should have read that one ahead of time.
Get more days. We tried to get, as Suzanne will remember, Brian, our first, we wanted one a month. That was our original proposal. And the system originally countered with none, I think. And then we went back and forth and we had to settle for 5, but certainly we're going to negotiate the contract, start negotiations next year for the successor agreement. And we will be entertaining all kinds of changes around workload and overburdened teachers and educators.
And the bargaining surveys will help dictate those proposals. So if you feel strongly about that, you should let that be known.
Yeah, the bargaining survey will be coming out in early spring of this year.
And we have a question about the next bargaining process. They wanted to know, for the next negotiation, are we going to look at elementary schools that are attached to academies?
Yeah, that's come up. We do need some stronger language because, for example, we added and made clear that ECCs and specialty schools would go in with the elementary planning time, because that was unclear, and we don't have clear language right now on academies and where they fit and how we can, and then have that in writing so we don't have to have constant back and forth about that. So that's on our radar for sure. But again, as Brian said, look for the survey. There's always a place to put your own thoughts and comments into the survey. So you could add any ideas that you have.
So it looks like that's it from Facebook, Gary, in terms of questions. So I think that's a wrap.
All right, I'll turn it back over to our co-chairs just to say any final thoughts and good nights.
Well, we would like to thank everyone for coming out. Lynn, you want to wrap us up?
Yes, thank you all so much for coming out. And please pass on to all your colleagues when we have the next training, and please reach out. We are here to assist you in any way we can. And we will be doing some outreach to our buildings to make sure that everybody is getting all the rights that they deserve, and that we're trying to move forward with the least amount of stress in our jobs as possible. That's why we're
And I guess one last question came in about a stipend for special ed teachers to be included in the negotiations for next year. Have we considered that?
They already do get a additional money in the contract.
Differential.
So special educators are already a part of that.
They get a differential.
Yeah, the differential, all special educators get a differential.
right. That's correct. They do get a differential.
Okay, so no stipend increase for the next.
Well, no, what we'll do is what we did last time is try to increase the differential in the last round of bargaining. We increased the differential by 4% each year of the contract. Obviously, we're going to go in and ask for more money in the differentials for special educators and others, just as we're going to go in and ask for increases to everybody's base pay to kind of get ahead of, not equal to, but ahead of the rate of inflation.
And we have answered all of our questions in the Q&A. Oh, wait a minute. They're coming in. More questions. Let's see.
Someone asked about class size. Can we do anything about class size?
Class size is something that's governed by state law. We're going to try to do something with that, but that's going to have to come through the legal process. So we're going to have to really increase our PAC contributions, so our political action committee, so that we can do something with the legislation to get that changed.
Yeah, the state of Maryland class size is an illegal subject of bargaining. You cannot bargain class size.
They don't want to shoot themselves in the foot, basically.
But some states do allow it, and so it's not unheard of. And we will keep trying at the state level to have that move that into either a permissible subject of bargaining, but what we would like is for it to be a mandatory subject of bargaining. I doubt we'll get that first, but we would like it to be something that we could bargain if the other side agreed to it. And that would be a matter of putting pressure on the Board of Ed in Prince George's County to bargain that issue.
Okay, so this one person came back to clarify. The question is, what considerations can be made for ILTs during the next planning, during the next negotiation round?
I say put in everything that you are
In that
concerned about
survey.
in the bargaining survey, so we can go through all of it. We're going to do our best to get as much language as possible. We had the biggest increase in language the last go round, and we're willing to go hard and try again.
And I would also point out, right now, you can still fill out the application to join the bargaining team. So there's right now an application that's out. Amanda might remember when it closes, I don't. But it would be great if we had an ILT on the team, if that's an area where the contract needs to be strengthened. So if you're an ILT and you're interested, or you know an ILT is, have them fill out the application to join the bargaining team in our next round of contract negotiations. I think we better call it a wrap. It's now 8:10.
All right, yes, one that's our students out November 10th. Yes, they are. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Please, please, please make certain that your building reps or somebody get those few minutes on your principal's agendas at the end of the faculty meeting so that you can call your announcements, have your monthly meetings, unify.
And please don't forget, when you tell the principal you are entitled to this time at the end of the monthly meetings, email them. Always put it in writing.
Yes.
I'd like to thank the co-chairs, the UNISERV, and you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. And we're going to give you the gift of time. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to email any of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.